Hi, I'm Christoph Loch. I'm the Dean of the Cambridge Judge Business School. I also, as an academic, I have worked for the last 25 years with companies in various industries on innovation, on strategy and its execution in turbulent times. And I have accompanied a number of startups through gut-wrenching changes where their existence was at stake. And today our topic is leadership at a time of disruption. And disruption, you guessed it, is related to the terrible catastrophe that is unfolding around us with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I will say a few words about what is the role of leaders in challenging situations like that. So times of disruption, the COVID-19 crisis is in some sense the worst catastrophe I've seen in my 35 years of professional life. And unique in the sense that it is really cutting across all kinds of sectors. However, a disruption we have had much more often than that. And actually there is one pretty much every decade. If you just think 20 years back, around the year 2000, we went through the dot-com crisis when actually real e-commerce was born. Then we had, not even 10 years later, the economic crisis of 2008. We are still going through the crisis of Brexit, which is not done yet. And then, of course, COVID-19 struck unexpectedly. Now, none of the other crises have been as broad as COVID-19. However, all of those crises have caused the competitive landscape to really change and to force companies to make large changes in ways that are sometimes in hindsight forgotten. So this is actually not unique. We are every once in a while in situations like this. So as leaders, we actually need to engage. We can't say, this has never happened to me before. In different industries, this actually does happen quite regularly. So the question is now, what is the role of a leader in an organization that is undergoing such a change? And this is about something that is called resilience. Okay, here's a definition of resilience. Resilience is the ability to be successful, both personally and professionally, in the middle of high-pressured, fast-paced, and continuously changing environment. So resilience is the ability to respond to large, quick, unforeseeable changes. And I will speak about three things that a leader of an organization needs to do in order to help his or her organization to get through this change in the environment. The first one is risk management, the ability to stop the bleeding from stopping the organization to really be damaged and possibly to go under. And going under, that's actually the threat that we're talking about in some industries. The second step is once you have provided a floor so it can't get worse, then you need to look at the strategic assumptions that are underlying your business right now. You need to understand what are the things that are no longer working and start to identify, well, what could be working instead so we actually have something positive to go to. And the third step that a leader needs to accomplish is to bring the organization along. People don't like change. People are threatened and scared by change. People may not have an interest to change. So bringing your organization along, even though conceptually it may be a no-brainer, is still hard work. And it requires that you as a leader fulfill certain function in order to enable your people to come along with you on the journey to something new. So I will say a few words to each one of those three responsibilities of the leader. And by the way, we are preparing a program which we call Growth and Resilience in CJBS Executive Education, which we will make available to SMEs of the UK. So let's talk about the first step, risk management, establishing a floor. The first thing you need to do is you need to understand how bad it is. If you let things running will this become life-threatening? Will you actually run out of cash? Once you're running out of cash, you're dead. The organization will have to stop operating. So establish the floor, make sure that you don't go down further than something that leaves the organization intact, and make sure that you conserve the cash, that you focus, that you cut, that you bring the organization to a level with which it can at least survive until you have made the necessary changes. So for example, in some travel businesses that I know, they had to let 80% of their personnel go in order to be able to survive until travel picks up again. In the, to take an exotic example, in the UK football industry, the small clubs at the lower levels of professional football all have to furlough 90% of the personnel, or even 95% of the personnel, in order to be able to survive until games with paying spectators can start again. So this may require very, very painful steps. And this is like in a company that has to go through restructuring. The second step is related to giving people the feeling that there is hope. You see at the bottom right here the picture of a maze. If the people in your organization have the feeling that they just run into a maze and there is no end in sight and they have no idea where this will go, they may despair and simply fall apart and no longer be capable of functioning. So there is a very important leadership role you have to play. Number one is you have to respect people. You can't just beat them down. It's not their fault. You have to give them the feeling that this is not their problem caused by them, that they're still worthy professionals and that there is therefore a way forward. You need to lead by example by being calm and positive. If you panic, everybody else will panic. And you need to give people a sense that we will get through this. There is a way forward. There is a way out of this on the other side. Once people lose the hope that there is a way out of this on the other side, they will despair and possibly freeze up and not be able to function anymore. If there is a part of your organization where there is no hope, where you know this has no future, then you see this word here, isolate them, take them to the side. So at the moment when that becomes clear, that there is no future in the organization for this part, that this part doesn't contaminate the rest, you need to keep them then apart. Third point is the customers who you still have, even in these difficult times where you may be losing the majority of your business, serve them well. Don't fall into the situation that at the moment you are conserving cash, you're cutting costs, everybody is stressed, people are afraid, and therefore you're treating the customers who still do come to you badly. That is the recipe for disaster, because then you will lose them as well. The organization needs to find a way of serving the customers who you are still serving well, so they like the experience and they come back to you, and you can possibly even turn this into a strength. This is absolutely key. And the last point is ensure your presence. Show people that you're still there. So give people a marketing message. We're still here. We're in business. We want to work with you. We want your business, and we will continue to be here. Some people call this brand resilience, but it's really the message that people don't give up on you. Some small companies do this with flyers. You can do this with emails. Maybe not with advertisement because that's too expensive. What can you do in order to show your customers that you will still be there? Because then you have a chance to win them back. If they have given up on you, then they will not come back. Okay, so this is the minimum set of things that you need to do in order to establish a floor, to make sure that your spiral doesn't go so deep that you cannot come back from it. This requires some very difficult decisions. You may have to stare some unpleasant things in the face, but if you shrink from taking the right decisions at this point, there may be no future. So you have to get through this. So once you have done this very hard part, and this may go on for a while, even as you are working through a new goal and a new business, you may have to work still at a minimum basis in order to survive. So this is not something, that you do for a couple of weeks, then it's done. You may have to continue to do this until the new business that you're creating actually comes through. But at some point, you need to go from stemming the bleeding to something that is really forward-looking. And in order to go to the forward-looking, you need to have a very clear picture. What was the logic based on which you have been operating so far? You need to take a hard look at your existing strategy and business model. Okay? Now, that sounds like a very, very long exercise. However, it is possible to reduce your current strategy to 4 very fundamental questions. And you see those 4 questions here on this picture. The first question is, can you describe what is it that you are actually offering? What is the product that you offer? Is it a manufactured product? Is it a product plus a service? What are you not offering? For example, maybe you are not offering maintenance. What are people doing with what you offer? So describe what are people buying from you. The second question is the who. That is the question for your customers. Can you describe who your customers are? So if you have a B2B business, that means each customer is different and you have to describe every single one of them individually. If you sell to consumers, then can you describe to me who the groups of your customers are who are similar? What are your segments? Are they households? Are they young? Are they old? Are they male? Are they female? Where do they live? Are they wealthy or not so wealthy? So can you characterize what these customers, who these customers are and what their needs are? The third question is the why question. Why do people buy your product and service at all? And why from you rather than from somebody else? What is your competitive strength? What is your value proposition? Is it because you're cheaper? Is it because you have more features? Is it because you smile more and are nicer? Is it because you have some kind of unique features? Is it better quality? What are the things which are causing your customers to come to you and pay your prices? Okay, this is about your competitive position. And the final question on the right is the business model. That's the configuration of how you actually deliver your product or service. So what are the things that you do? What are your core processes versus what you buy from the outside? If you are a barber, for example, do you just cut the hair, but you buy the shampoo? Or do you also make or have your own brand of shampoo? So what is the depth of your delivery, right? What do you do? What do you do through partners? For example, do you make a product and somebody else packages it for you, or do you do all of that yourself? What do the customers pay for? Do they buy something or do they rent something? Or do they get something for free and then they agree that they get advertisement because they use your product and that's how you make your money? So what do you charge people and how do you charge? Okay, and then finally, there is something about governance and how do you control your IP. If you can answer these 4 questions clearly, you have characterized what businesses you are in and how you compete. Okay, and for each different business that you have, you will have to fill this out separately. Now, in a situation of disruption, your current strategy doesn't work anymore. Okay, so for example, the product that you used to sell may now be obsolete. So for example, at the moment, mass tourism flights are obsolete. Nobody takes them. Mass tourism flight has, at least temporarily, disappeared. So it's a product that you can't even sell anymore, no matter how good you are, right? Or cruise ships, at the moment, the cruise ship market has simply disappeared. So have your products been in principle undermined, or is your product in principle still viable? Second, on the who, Maybe there are customers who used to buy from you, but they can no longer buy from you. For example, SMEs at the moment across the whole country are all down on the ground. If you used to sell some kind of an industrial service to SMEs, let's say accounting services, at the moment, they simply do not have the funds to buy your services, on top maybe of an absolute minimum that is required by law. Or maybe they go bankrupt and they can't even do that anymore. Okay, so that's why I'm saying here SMEs for certain products may just no longer be viable customers. In our own case, certain types of our executive education customers at the moment, they will not be able to come and buy our products because in their companies, the budget for these kinds of activities have been struck out. Okay, so which of your customers are currently not capable of continuing to buy your services? Maybe the product is still there, the customers are still there, but the competitive criteria have shifted. For example, people used to be able to go for some kind of customization or luxury, and now, because everybody is with their back to the wall, the only thing that matters is cost. Or maybe in some industries, sustainability is now really come to the fore because the situation is shifting on them anyway. And so they're now looking for sustainability in ways that they haven't done before. Or they used to come to the shop and now they don't come to the shop anymore at all. And the only thing that matters is whether you have a comfortable online availability. Okay, so the competitive strength may be completely distorted during the time of a disruption. Okay, and in terms of the business model, maybe what used to be efficient is no longer efficient now, right? For example, it used to be efficient to be somewhere, in corner shops close to where people live, and now it's only online. Maybe now availability of the product is actually tantamount and more important than anything else. Maybe now actually what really matters is whether you are capable of allowing people to pay slowly over time rather than all at once, because people don't have the money to pay all at once. So are your delivery criteria changing because of the disruption in how the market is functioning? Okay, so the point of this complicated slide is you need to do an analysis so you understand which aspect of my strategy, which aspects, if it's several, are no longer working. You can't just blindly change things. You need to understand where your strategy is falling down so you can make changes which are targeted toward an improvement. If you don't understand where the breakdowns are, then you can't bring improvements into how you do your business. Okay, this is very, very important in order to make changes. Now, there is one very important aspect of this which I want to direct your attention to a little bit more. The competitive criteria, so the value proposition, how people compare you to your competitors, that is done through the eyes of the customer. So it's important that you understand how the customer sees you, that you look at your business not inside out, but outside in, through the eyes of your customer. That may sound trivial, and I have yet seen so many small companies who think they're great, but who have for too long not checked that through the eyes of the customer. So I'll give you an example here. This is from our SME growth program from a couple of years ago. This is a real example, okay? This is a tool which is called Value Curves. So there was one company which participated in this course. This was a conveyancing company, so a small solicitor office that helps people to buy a house, that does the legal process of transferring the ownership of a house to the customer of that conveyancing service. So they had identified that what their customers really care about is this list of elements of customer value. So people look at price, how much do you cost? Do I have confidence in your capability? Do you give me advice without burying me in legalistic jargon so I understand what you're actually saying to me? Can I trust you that you're really going to have my back? Are you responding quickly, or is this going to drag for 5 months before the sale of the house has gone through? And are you keeping me updated? Are you really good in communication with me throughout? Okay, so these were the dimensions of the service criteria that the customers cared about. And then the exercise of a value curve says we compare ourselves, so this is our firm here, to a high street firm and an online firm. And you see that our client here, our firm, thought we are better in capability. We are better in giving people jargon-free advice. We are better in trust. We are faster. We are better in communication. The only thing where we are not better is in price, because we are more expensive than these other firms. So this firm drew this curve and concluded, oh, we're actually pretty good. We're a bit expensive, but we are worth it. And then the shocking thing is that when a firm like this actually undergoes the effort of really asking their customer, for example, with a little survey, or with sending somebody around in order to to interview a number of customers, what they find is that actually, no, that's not what the customers think about you. That's what you think the customers think about you, but you haven't verified it. It happens very easily, much more easily than we like to admit to ourselves, that we are looking at ourselves through rose-tinted glasses. If you don't have a real picture of how the customers look at you, you cannot analyze your competitive situation correctly, and you will not draw the correct conclusions. Okay, so as part of an analysis of, in a disruption, what should we do differently, you need to have your hands on the pulse of the customer. Otherwise, you will not come to the right conclusions. Okay, this doesn't have to be a huge bureaucratic exercise. If you get 10 to 15 customers to say that to you, already get a picture. You can do this quite quickly. Okay, now, here's a way of thinking about what could we actually do. Now look at this little grid. So here you see there is our current customers versus could we reach out to new customers? And here is our current product or service offering, the one that we're offering now, versus could we actually take some variant and offer customers something slightly different? This is where we are now. So how can we make our organization resilient? Well, there are three fundamentally different ways of doing this. The first one is, can I continue to speak to my current customers with my current product or service? And the assumption here is that my current product or service hasn't become fundamentally obsolete. Can I change, modify my offering to these customers so I am overcoming some of the current things that are not working anymore? For example, can I offer it quite a bit cheaper? Can I offer it online? Can I make it more convenient? Okay, can I make it safer? So for example, if you go into many shops in Cambridge right now, in spite of the lockdown, in spite of the fact that you're not allowed to get close to anyone, so these shops have isolated a little piece in their sales area. People go in alone or in groups of two. You talk to somebody behind the counter, you tell them what you want, and then they go and get it for you, and then they take payment. Now that's a bit slower, but at least it allows them to even provide the service at all by modifying the service that they have now in order to still be able to provide it. So the question here is, can I do something to my current service that makes it still sellable and attractive enough so customers come? And that may be something very pedestrian. It could also be something very clever, which actually then at some point may offer you additional opportunities. Okay, so that's one thing that you can think about in order to keep your business at least somewhat going. Now, the next idea is, can I stay with my customers because I know them well? And can I offer them something which is slightly different? Okay, so I stick with my customers, but I change what I offer. So let's go back to the travel industry example that I used earlier. So if you are a travel office, a travel provider, and you just can't send your customers to Greece or Spain or Italy at the moment, it's not possible. Can you offer them a bus tour to the Lake District? Can you offer them, a hiking trip around Cambridge? If you can't offer people anything in groups at all, could you even offer people, the ability to go with a coach, and go running, or in small groups, to do some exercises? Can I offer people a variant of travel which is appropriate in the current environment, which gives them some value because people are also locked in, that they are delighted about and that they're willing to pay for and that they derive value from? So can I modify my offer? Okay. The other way forward is to say, well, I have a product, but I cannot sell it to my current customers. Can I offer that product to other customers? So maybe the people here in England cannot fly at the moment, but maybe people from the Faroe Islands or people from Sweden, because there is no lockdown, maybe they can still fly. So can I take my offer and give it to people who are not under the same constraints as my current customers and offer it to them? Okay, so these are the principal avenues how I can look for ideas to change my offer in order to be resilient in the time of a disruption. Okay, now you may ask yourself, what about that fourth box here, where I go with a new offering to new customers, and the word here is risky. If you're piling on top of each other the risk of doing something new to customers who you don't know, this is very risky, and maybe that's not something to be done at high priority in a situation where you are fighting against going out of business. Okay, so in principle, we are looking for a structured way of generating ideas to make our current product better, to offer a variant to our current customers that they can buy, or to offer what we have to slightly different customers who are not under the same constraints as my current customers. So now you have an instrumentarium of directions. Where can I go with generating ideas of things that I could try in order to create additional opportunities for my business so I can survive? Okay. Now, there are a number of conditions or side comments about this. Okay. I said earlier that the leader has a very important responsibility to make sure that we know how big is the downside risk and to make sure that we go and we do search for additional opportunities. However, that doesn't mean that all the ideas have to come from the leader. On the contrary, these opportunity ideas, these forward-looking ideas, they do not have to come from the leader, him or herself. Actually, if you involve your entire organization, you will get more ideas and you will get better ideas. If you insist that the leader has the ideas, you're making the leader the bottleneck of the organization. Okay? So the key is the organization needs to understand that we do need to generate ideas, but everybody should make a contribution because everybody thinks slightly differently. And the more creative, the more broader the set of ideas is, the higher is the chance that actually a couple of them will work and will save your business. Secondly, the choice of opportunities has to be done in a way that people understand and that is transparent. Nothing happens faster in an organization than somebody saying, oh, I know why my idea wasn't taken. His or her idea was taken because actually, they have a special relationship. There is favoritism, there is cronyism, there is bribery, there is untrustworthiness. Very quickly in an organization under pressure, rumors are springing up and they may destroy people's willingness to give it their best shot. So you need to make transparent what are the criteria and to explain to people why in the end we're going this way and not that way. Transparency is very, very important in order to maintain the trust in your organization. The third condition is focus. You cannot run after 10 ideas. You can pilot 10 ideas. You can make small, quick, and cheap trials, but you cannot really follow up on 10 ideas. You will not have the resources to do it. You need to identify some ideas which are promising. You can do a little bit of trial, but very quickly you will have to invest only in a couple because otherwise you're going to run out of cash. Focus is really critical in doing this. And finally, in the end, you then have change projects on your hand. Change projects require discipline. They require that you really clearly set out what the goals are that need to be achieved, that you give responsibilities, that you plan carefully, that you do risk management, that you do all the pivoting and the change management that needs to go with it. If you don't have the project management discipline, you will not be able to push this through. And part of project management discipline is that you don't allow scope creep, where you set out to do something and then we say, oh, if you do that, maybe we could that little bit of extra. Oh, then we could also be doing this little bit of extra. Once you allow that, your projects will fail. Okay, so even though the ideas will not come from you, leadership behavior is very important in order to allow the organization to choose a direction and run there and be effective. Okay, now the final thing that I want to talk about is how do you actually get your organization to go with you? We have now covered how do you stop the bleeding, how do you establish a floor, how do you identify a direction where you can actually move forward rather than just reducing the damage. And so now we need to talk about what does it take to bring your organization with you so you get people's full effort rather than just a minimum token effort. The first piece of this is called fair process. Fair process is a formal, well-established method which turns out to be very effective in motivating organizations to go along with something new. There is lots of empirical evidence on this. And fair process has 4 principles. And to some degree, these 4 principles echo a few things that I just said on my previous slide. The first one is, when we are pursuing this new effort in order to change our business in disruption, you need to make sure that people understand that we are not now all of a sudden make up rules which are favoring some people over other people, that we are not breaking principles that we used to follow in the past, that we are now not all of a sudden violating ethical standards. People need to trust that we are doing this in a way which is consistent with the way our organization did things in the past. If you violate this, then again, people will conclude that anything goes, and if the people at the top are cheating, then why should we not cheat? The second point builds on this and is consistent with what I already said on the last slide. Transparency is key. Once decisions happen behind closed doors, the rumor mill will start going. People will very quickly start distrusting the decisions that you are taking. So you need to make information available to people so people can trust that there has not been a bias by the decision maker, for example, the boss, in order to do something that is good for him or her, but not for everybody else. Or not something that is good for their cronies or their friends, but not for everybody else. Transparency is very much needed in order to keep the organization aligned and in order to enable trust. Once you lose trust, people will no longer give you their collaboration. The third principle is called engagement, but what that really means is give people a voice. Okay? In legalistic terms in HR, here in the UK, this is called consultation. Okay, but it's more than that, because consultation is a formal process where you, to some degree, just go through the motions. Engagement means I am willing to listen to what people have to say before the decision has been made. The decision has been explained, but then I am allowing people to say, but wait a minute, what about this? Wait a minute, I'm worried about that. Wait a minute, I have an idea. Maybe we could even do something else. If you give people a voice, you are giving them respect. You're giving them the feeling that they can influence the outcome, even though you're not promising this to them. This is not a democracy. You are only saying, I will listen to you, but already that takes away from people the feeling of futility. It takes the hopelessness away. It gives people a feeling that they have a stake in the whole process. It's an emotional reaction. Okay? Give people a voice, listen to them, take them serious. And you may actually find that some people do have ideas which make what you had in mind even better. Okay, so engagement, giving people a voice is absolutely key. And finally, give people clarity about what's going to happen next. Right? Give them an understanding of, no, you will not lose your job. No, we will not have to work with a 20% wage cut. Give them a feeling for, yes, your job content may change a bit, but in principle, everybody will stay at the same level. Now, if it turns out that some people will have their work diminished or reduced, then again, make it transparent, explain why, give people a voice. And it turns out empirically that if you give people the respect of explaining them and being transparent about why in the end they may have to suffer something negative, the empirical evidence is that people are more willing and more capable to even suffer negative consequences. If you do not treat people with respect, if you are not transparent, then people will actually not be willing to take any negative outcome at all. On the contrary, people may even be cynical if the outcome for them happens to be positive. So the empirical evidence says that going through a change process in a period of disruption, following these principles, gives people an emotional excuse to want to collaborate. The reaction of people to this is emotional. And the difference between unfair process, which makes people upset and angry, and fair process, which makes people feel like, if I can at all justify it to myself, I would like to collaborate, actually makes a very big difference in the compliance and the collaboration of the organization that needs to change the strategy of how it competes and the business within which it operates. And this brings me to my final point. When staff explicitly or implicitly decide for themselves whether they follow through with this disruptive change, going with a new offering or going to a new set of customers, they don't do this to earn a bonus. Actually, bonuses in such situations are destructive, because a bonus assumes that you know exactly what the metric is that you're trying to optimize, which may not be at all the case here. People follow a disruptive change because they want to feel good, not because they are maximizing some incentive. And people feeling good depends on how you treat them. Okay? So again, there is a lot of empirical evidence that says people react positively and feel good if you show them respect. If you give people the feeling of significance, if you give them the feeling that they matter because you involve them in the change, you explained the change to them, you asked them for their opinion, you didn't lie to them, people are willing to go along. Secondly, a feeling of community is something that people really care about. We're in this together. We'll get through this together. We belong together. We owe something to each other. I am in something which is bigger than myself. People like to be a part of a community. They are proud of doing that. The third point is a relationship. It's trust. Okay? The leader builds a relationship of trust between him or herself and the organization. And again, that's where fair process comes in. If the organization feels that I have been honest and open and transparent, the organization is willing to trust me and therefore to follow me, because if they feel they can trust me, then I can ask them to make an extra step in the right direction. They will go the extra mile if they have trust. They won't if they don't. Ultimately, and that's the fourth point, we want to do more than just survive. We actually want to turn, or we want to prevent from falling to our death. Two, we can turn this around. We can actually do something exciting. If you can give people the feeling of, actually, we kind of understand where we can go, and this could actually be very good, it could be very exciting, that's where people really get mobilized. So if you can identify a vision of how we can turn this negative thing into, on the other side, where we come out of the crisis, into something that is positive, people will be very happy. And that's when people are really throwing themselves behind it fully. Finally, the last point. This is something which is actually not very often talked about. When you very often look at descriptions of how leaders need to behave in situations of change, it only talks about the first four things. And when you listen to it, it almost sounds like it needs to be a well-honed performance where you speak with a very convincing voice, and you shake hands and you look people into the eyes and you press all the right emotional buttons in order to convince people that they should follow you. And there's nothing behind this which says, well, and actually you need to mean what you say. You actually do need to be honest, not just pretend to be honest. It is possible to press all the right emotional buttons with the people in your organization and still lie to everybody. And that is not enough talked about. Sometimes there are leaders who are maybe not so charismatic, who are a bit clumsy, who are maybe not so great in relationship building. But if they're honest, if they have integrity, and if the organization knows that they have integrity, the organization is still willing to follow, because integrity, you mean what you say, you are telling people about something that is actually, to the best of your knowledge, the truth. This is the core of all the rest. If you don't have that last point, that you are really trying to act in the interest of the organization, all the rest is just mummery and acting. And then it can very easily fall apart and backfire on you if it is found out that it was actually not built on the truth. So the number one thing, so the last not least, number one thing is, if you are really acting in the interest of the organization, and if you can then get some help in communicating this in the right way, communication here is key, you can still do very well. All the points that I'm making here are not saying that you need to be a master crowd pleaser. What matters here is that you have thought about what you want to do, you really believe that this is good for the organization. For the rest, you can get help. But the veracity of what you're saying, that is really the essence of it. So these are the remarks that I wanted to share. As a leader in disruption who is building resilience for an organization, you have to create a floor. You have to make sure that the damage can't get worse than a certain worst case. You have to do the analysis and the creativity in order to find out, how can we turn the downward road into something that goes back up. So you need to understand what the changed strategy is, and you need to bring your organization along. And bringing your organization along takes honesty and a realization that bringing people along is an emotional piece of work, not a cold-blooded analytical piece of work. So I hope you found this interesting. Thank you very much.